Andrea will put on the PowerPoint. We'll kind of go through a few things, but go ahead. Let's just start it, Andrea.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you. Well, again, everybody, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to our May webinar, Broker's Choice. So this one is all you. So thank you so much for putting in your suggestions. We're very excited about this. The vote was challenging loans. So today we're going to talk through some challenging loans and ways to overcome those challenges. So again, as always, here's our disclaimer. Thank you for your support. Again, here's our presenters, mainly presenter, Mr. Greider, David Greider. Thank you for joining us again, our SVP of Wholesale Lending. Again, my name is Andrea Formato, and I am the Sales Training Manager here at Home Express. This is our agenda. It looks lengthy, but as you guys are coming to see the end, the last few sections of the webinar, it has some good appendix information, right? Information about Home Express, our website, contact information, and some program guides. So as always, we'll be sending you out a copy of this deck and the recording of this webinar in the next few days. So be on the lookout for that. So Mr. Greider, I'll go ahead and kick it off to you, but don't get too comfortable because as you know, I have a poll coming up after this slide.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for everybody that participated and did our poll for kind of what you guys wanted to hear and understanding, challenging loans was the winner of the topic this month. And I'm telling you, I agree with you. I think given the environment we're in with the rates that have moved up, limited inventory, it's a need-based. And so with volume being down a little bit on purchase and everything, low inventories, everybody's going to wait that. The loans that you're getting are need-based and have a legitimate loan story to them that you really got to understand. And so I thought I'd go in a perspective of how to make it not challenging as much, right? So that's kind of the point I do it. Then we're going to give you some of the areas I see where the challenges are, and then give you some examples of loans where they were challenging and ways to overcome them. And as we go through this, in the chat box, if you got certain scenarios or loans that you think are challenging, put them in the chat box. I will take those at the end individually because the loan you have challenging on your desk is probably similar to others that are on this webinar. That way we all can learn together. And I'm a glass half full type of person, right? Given when the volume's kind of down, especially in the agency world, we all kind of know kind of stuff that's kind of shrink down a little bit on mortgage application. Use this opportunity to learn the manual underwriting because that's what non-QM is. It's just manual underwriting, doesn't fit the DU or AUS approval, and you figure out why, and you have really good people that need to move forward with their families to purchase a new home or get the cash out for their daughter, son to go to college or to pay off some consumer debt, those type of things. And we all know that we all have had issues in the past or different circumstances, job changes, those type of things, where you may have needed to get a home loan and didn't quite fit the traditional underwriting standards. So on this path, the clear path is so important to understand the loan, right? What is the loan purpose? Does the benefit make sense? And you kind of say, well, it's Captain Obvious. Well, some of them are obvious, right? Hey, I live in this 2-bedroom home. I had a baby now. I've got a couple of families growing. I need a little bigger. That's pretty obvious. But some of the things we get in or that you kind of look at is they want to buy an investment property. They're 5 miles away and it's twice the big as a home now. Well, does that really make sense? It could. So the reason I say no, because at Home Express, we look at each loan with its own merits, and we don't say automatically, no, we can't do that. We're going to let it escalate up. We have loan committees because we want to do every loan. We want all your challenging loans and to help you structure those to overcome that. So you saw the purchase some of that. That's some of that moving down, why they're moving, that kind of stuff. If it's a non-owner occupied, is it clearly investment property? And if it doesn't look that way, we ask for supporting documents to try to overcome that. Refinance, cash out, monthly savings, right? Don't want to put a borrower in a worse position. That's really what it is, right? Then payment shock has come up a little bit through this. I've seen some of the ways to overcome that. Sometimes the loans would be, my voice sounds muffled, so I apologize for that. I'm going to take off my speakers and see if this happens. Andre, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, well, we'll go from this. This is fine. We'll go to the next slide because it's got so much detail here, and I try to keep it to 15, 20 minutes for you. So we'll go to the next slide, and we'll kind of go through all the stuff that makes it challenging loans and that kind of stuff.
Okay, we will go to the next slide, but before we do that, can you see my poll here, David?
You see your poll.
Okay, excellent. This is going to be the perfect segue into the next slide. So we're curious, all of you suggested that you wanted challenging loans for the webinar. So what is your biggest challenge? What have you experienced recently with non-QM? Has it been income is your biggest challenge? Or is it credit? Is it the property itself or the reasonability, right, of the deal? So we just wanted to see oh, this is interesting. It was neck and neck for a second, but then one of the challenge categories kind of leapt out here. Nope, it's evening out. So do you have a guess? You know, Mr. Grutter, I always like to have you put you on the spot
So
here.
right now, in today's environment would be income would be the number one if it's a consumer loan, property if it's a business purpose investment.
Hmm.
So it's kind of probably tied between income and property.
Yeah, so that was a good one. I'll give it just a couple more seconds here. I'm looking for the numbers, but let's go ahead and end it and share the results. So income was the biggest challenge. So nice job on that one. And then next, credit and reasonability were pretty close, and then property. So all of the credit, property, reasonability are a close second, but absolutely income is the biggest challenge. So let's go ahead with that being said,
Yeah,
and let me move on to the next slide.
excellent. And then again, we got income on the top, right? So it is. I'm going to tell you a little bit about income. I have when I went to college, whatever you do, I got a degree in accounting, and I remember going through the basis of accounting of how businesses are set up. Now, the business are set up, and they teach you in accounting. Okay, you get your business account, you get all your gross receipts coming in there, and then you pay all your bills of the business at the end of the month or for the month. You take the income and you transfer it over to your personal account, and that's the income that you have. However, that is not reality. Reality is there is a lot of different accounting methods out there that business owners use. And in fact, with technology, from when I went to school and today, there's a lot of ways to receive business receipts, right? And so ability to pay income, which we'll do a little bit deeper dive, is a big one. And so all we're trying to do, if it's an income file, especially the self-employed, is to understand their business receipts that they get in that are regular, predictable income and applying appropriate expense factor. The W-2 paycheck stub type of borrower, fairly easy, but you still might have a hang up on DTI where we can have other avenues. They might have a side job they've done for a couple of years. There can be assets that you can use for income, right? The other thing I put is reasonability tests, right? And again, as underwriting has developed over years, there's kind of a standard, a normal person standard. And if you deviate from that, we're not saying no. It just means you need more documentation to explain the scenario and why that makes sense. Credit, again, I put credit. You do need to have a certain FICO score, but I always look at that as what's their willingness to repay, and does their credit kind of support that they'll be able to make that payment? Vested interest is big. And I learned that from my mom a long time ago, right? It's like what you value is what you put your money and time into, right? So that's what vested interest here. It's not that we don't have 100% gift funds allowed. We do, but it's one which that's something to look at, right? Then the property, right? That was another one on that poll. And again, I get asked this question all the time. Can you do this AR5 zoning? Well, that's not how we look at it here. It's more of like, is it marketable and is it legal? And so that's what look at. So if you have a remote property that's gone 100 acres out somewhere in the mountaintop, it's a little bit different marketability than in a suburban community, right? And then legalities of it, right? Does it have unpermitted, kitchens in it, right? Because those could be problematic. And so I can see where some of the property issues in today's lending of things you get. And these are probably more prevalent today because of COVID, where people are trying to move out of some of the more urban, suburban areas to get a little more land or some privacy with everything happening, moving out of some of those higher populated areas. So we're going to take a little bit look at deeper dive into those. We'll go to the next slide here, and we'll look at some income top types, right? And again, these aren't all inclusive, right? And so when you have a deal, the number one thing you can do, you don't have to be an expert at it when I start going all those. What you need to be an expert on is who is you connected to? Are you connected to the right account executive in non-QM that's an expert in manual underwrites, right? That will be able to structure. What we like for you to be is take the consultative approach with that borrower and say, hey, it didn't quite fit the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac rules or traditional things. Hey, we just need to know a loan story and try to get as much information as you can so you'll talk to your highly trained Home Express account executive and they're going to be able to structure this deal for you. So a full doc or 1 year full doc, we have those, and sometimes that's the way to go, right? Bank statements is probably the ones that non-QM is more prevalent, probably 60-70% of the borrowers on consumer purpose utilize business bank statements or some type of multiple bank statements to get the business receipts down. And we do have the technology through our XConnect portal to underwrite that before submission or before the borrower goes out and is looking for that new home. And then we have some P&L programs on here, P&L only, and some P&L with a couple, 2-3 months bank statements to help support that to give you higher LTV. And then again, at the bottom, assets. Assets can be used for ATR in full, or we can change those assets to income and then add that to the 1003 as asset depletion or asset assist and to make that DTI work for you. So that's a little bit of the income types. Again, don't have to be an expert. We have some other ones. The big thing for you is that try to gather information, understand what they do, and relay that in a consultative manner to the account executive, and we can help structure that loan for you. Let's look at some credit obstacle. And again, I'm not a big FICO person. That's not exactly what we look at. But again, these are traded loans into the bond market eventually. So FICO score, you got to have it. And so to get into a consumer loan, you need a 620 score, and for non-owner occupied business purpose is 640. So that's your consultative approach. And up there, you kind of look at, hey, some of the biggest factors that affect the FICO score is credit utilization. So a lot of you that I know that are out there personally utilize that as their consultative approach. Let's get you the right score for the right LTV, right payment for you, those type of things. Trade lines has also been an issue. Some borrowers have gone that you're getting credit invisible. Hey, I've had credit in the past, didn't like it, it doesn't, so they kind of limited that. How do you handle that if they don't have sufficient trade lines on the credit report? We're going to deal, and I'll show you the example of that others. Housing history, another one, right? And that's probably the biggest trade line in a manual underwrite is how they pay their housing history. However, there's a lot of borrowers that have made a great financial decision to have a lower rent payment or to live with family during this time. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Maybe they just saved up money. And that's, if they're making a right financial decision, that is usually a good borrower in a manual underwriting aspect. Payment shock, you got to look at a little bit, right? If it's really high, you really know the expense of a home that goes in there. Late payment, right? And a lot of people have, through their career lives have had job gaps or been layoffs, especially in the tech industry. I'm in Northern California, so you see that. And then there's some life events or credit events that you talk about, that's your foreclosure, or bankruptcy, or something that happened, right? And how to overcome that. So those are some of the credit obstacles. And if you explain that, we have programs with several bankruptcies in the last year, right, to help them out on their things. So it's same with late payments, right? As long as we understand it and that problem's resolved and they're back on their feet, probably have a good at least offer for you on them getting that home or some cash out. Property obstacle, there's another big one, right? And I took the first one is that rural versus suburban, because I see this all the time. What are you going to call it? And luckily at Home Express, we're a true lender. We underwrite to our guidelines, spend our own money. So we take this approach of rural suburban. It does not matter what the appraiser puts on there. The appraiser has 3 boxes they can put on a property, and that's urban, suburban, or rural. There's no box that says suburban with rural characteristics or vice versa. So if it's next to some employment or commerce, even though that appraiser puts rural we can just make the decision and call it suburban without you having to go back to the AMC and having to change. We make the decision here, and you'll see that in certain areas. So why is this rural, but it's close to everything? Maybe that's the decision. So that is kind of like kind of blurred a little bit over COVID, and that where you see some more of the, we used to be maybe considered rural 10, 15 years ago. It really isn't, but the appraiser is marketed rural, and it really does not make sense. We're able to overcome that through the manual underwriting. Now, also got remote excess acreage. That affects the marketability. Not saying no to that. It might have reduced LTV, those type of things due to marketability. The next thing I've seen a lot over the last 30 days is subject to. When I look at the inventory out there for sale, right, just inventory out there for sale on existing homes, there's a lot that if they're really, really nice, decked out, they usually go fast. If they have a little bit of issues, now we get these subject to appraisals. And unfortunately, if the appraiser puts subject to, those items have to be fixed before you fund, right? If they don't, they just make a comment into it. Maybe that's the way to go. It's like, hey, they got a broken window, right? And then they put a subject. Why don't you just put, hey, it's as is. This is a value. And put a note on there, fix the window. That way, the borrower can fix the window that's broken. Take an iPhone picture of it. Give us here's your invoice pay. You don't have to go back to the AMC. So these are things to overcome on it's challenging. Next is non-permitted additions. I've seen a few of those lately. And the biggest thing is a garage conversion is just a bedroom. If you're doing kitchens or plumbing that's not permitted, you want to include that in the GLA. That's a little bit tougher in non-QM than maybe Fannie or Freddie. So just kind of be aware as you're doing the consulting of that property with that borrower, what that will look like. So typically, non-permitted additions, that's typically is fine, unless it's something that's electrical, plumbing, but we still need to make sure the GLA matches what the public records have. Seizing from last transfer, right? Probably seen that on this property. It's like, hey, they bought it, or the seller bought it 3 or 4 months ago, price, rehab becomes there. So kind of look at that. And also on a purchase, on this marketability, I've seen some where it come in, but the days on market is 400 days. Is that a marketable property? It could be. Maybe it's just way high and it comes down. There's just things to look at and try to get the story on, right? Declining values. We've had that in certain areas of the country. And how we look at that is probably a -5 from the max LTV. But you're going to see that in certain segments of our country right now. Unique properties are tough on non-QM. You want to kind of a regular. So if you see really unique, they might need to go to a different source of hard money in that. But still, we're going to try to help you. Our AEs are experts in this field and probably have an exit strategy for you for that unique property. Non-ownable condos, right? We see some of those that come in. Basically, if it's a litigation where it's the subject property is they're suing the builder for defects, those are very difficult to get done. But the ones that we see most likely go through really, really easy is the occupancy, right? Less than 50% owner occupied. Those are pretty easy to do. Or I've seen a lot in the state of Florida with leasehold on the recreation facilities. Those are fine. So just to take a look at that. The more you can get information to us at the beginning, you won't have that challenging loan through the process. Short-term rentals, though, that really has got taken off the last 3 years. A lot of rules have been set that, and it now has a pretty decent market. But kind of know what that is on that property. So if you're doing a consultant approach with your borrower and they're buying an investment property, you say it's a great short-term rental. Make sure you're doing it up front with that AMC when you order the 1007 to get the short-term rental calculations on that versus the long-term rents or the notes, and maybe give them some comps, right? Because not everybody is thinking the same way you are, right? It's really trying to be like-minded, everybody on the same page of it with all the parties involved, and it goes through a lot smoother.
So David, before we go through the next slide, I have my second poll that I'm going to launch here. And this is a true or false poll. Okay, here we go. True or false? Borrower can use gift funds for funds to close. So let's give everybody a moment here. I like where we're going with this. I love that I can see the results when nobody else can.
I can't see them, so I don't know.
I know. I love that.
I'm a true.
Yeah, yep. So I'm just waiting for a couple more minutes to see what everybody thinks as far as can the borrower use gift funds for funds to close. I'm going to go ahead and end it. And what do you think the answer is? What do you think everyone said?
True, 80%, 90% true. Great,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So to overcome that, that is awesome. That is absolutely true, right? So at 80% LTV and under, you can use 100% gift funds for most of the programs except for the business purpose section of the non-owner occupied. But I mean, it is important to know the funds to close and reserves. Remember, I kind of go through the vested interest, right? Yeah, let's say you need a compensating factor, which I have a slide on this. This is good. Hey, we're using 100% gift funds, but they have the money outside of that. That is awesome, right? And again, I've seen loans in here, first-time home buyers where that couple got married and they got their parents on both sides give them the money. Great borrowers. They actually had the money. It was 100% gift funds. Perfect, right? It did make sense with someone who say you got to have 5% of your own funds. Now, in some cases, you go over 80, we want at least 5% own funds, but your account executive is going to know these and know how to structure that for you, right? So make sure you do this. And I'm going to tell you, I talk to our AEs all the time on this, and I don't know how it happens because we're all purchasing a home from a real estate agent or a loan officer's perspective, I'm thinking you kind of know where the funds to close on are coming from. But during this process, going all the way to the funding, all of a sudden at the last day or so, or at the day of funding, what do you get? You get a different bank account. Oh, and you get a gift fund letter. There's not necessarily a problem with it, but it slows you down. So I always ask if it's going to change from initial, make sure 10 days for a COA date, you kind of true that up a bit. If this is what we're doing, so we can clear that through underwriting because we're still subject to BML, bank money laundering laws, and all those things that came out. So an underwriter does have to sign off of that on those funds to close, right? So kind of look at that. So own funds, gift funds, does that still funds need to be sourced or seasoned, and the length of time on that. And not saying that, what if it's not sourced in season 60 days, right? Let's know that. I mean, we can make decisions on getting that still done for you. Just be upfront with us, let us know where you're at. But I have on the bottom here, right, is the reasonability test. And I always say this, when you go through it, you go through all these factors we went through, right? Income, if it's income related, or cash flow property is done order. You looked at the credit, you looked at the loan purpose, right? You looked at the funds. Step back before that goes in, just 5 minutes, that's all it takes. Does this seem reasonable? Right? That's the normal person type. Like this makes sense. If you do that, man, your loans are not going to appear to be challenging anymore. And again, you don't have to be an expert in all this, but be the consultant of what they have, working with your account executive. It will help you immensely. So let's look at some compensating factors, and then I'm going to give you some examples, right? So compensating factors that say we need to make an exception. Someone would be minimal payment shock. If they're paying a housing payment similar to what the new mortgage is going to be, probably a good loan, right? Because they already demonstrated they can handle that payment. We could expect that to go in the future. LTV, right? The vested interest, and you got a lower LTV, that helps a lot on making sure that that loan performs. DTI, when people go delinquent, doesn't matter if credit card, autos, mortgage, it really is because of income. They just don't have the money right now. Something happened, right? So if you have a lower DTI, that kind of stuff, and that goes to the other side on reserves, reserves, right? Well, if you have no reserves and something happens medically, or you get sick and you can't work, or something happens with that, how are you going to make your payments, right? So reserves is a big deal to look at, even if it's not required, right? So we have loans where reserves aren't required, and we use cash out for reserves on most of our programs, right? Look at the housing history, credit, marketability of the property, a real nice property in a good area, great. It's kind of flat on the values, it's not decreasing in the market share. And stability and length of employment is important as well. So you have all of those. We can make exceptions to what you're trying to get done based on these, right? So kind of keep that in mind as you go through and structure, and especially going to a true lender in the manual underwriting space. So let's look at some examples here, closing in about 30 minutes. And so I kind of chose three for you as we're getting close to 30 minutes here. Example one, I remember this loan is one of our sales managers on the East Coast in the state of Pennsylvania. It was a purchase for a first-time home buyer, 680 FICO, and 20% down, had the money, but you're looking at it, it's self-employed, very limited trades. I mean, really, you look at credit report, not much there, right? I'm looking at this guy has a successful business, able to save up money, and he didn't want to have a lot of personal credit. Is that necessarily a bad financial decision? No, it could be a great financial decision for him. So we utilized the 12-month business bank statements for the ATR, and we went with hard proof of how they paid their housing. And we used that as a trade line. Had minimum payment shock, great length of employment, funded, right? That's without the normal trade lines on their credit report. Example two, kind of like this one, because this came up over the last 3 years. I know everybody's not necessarily into the crypto space now, but this is the state of California. The purchase was 1.2 million, 20% down. The challenge was documenting funds to close reserves. So it kind of ended up, what else do you have? Because the guy made money or the lady made money. That is when we went into where the funds going to close come from at the end of the day. Well, that Bitcoin over 6-7 years, that 40 Bitcoin. Now, okay, great. We could prove that he owned it for greater than 60 days. The only issue is now we just need to convert that into a U.S. bank statement so we could use it for the down payment, which was done, right? So we got that into the bank account. We used that for the funds to close, reserves, all that type of stuff. So there's out-of-the-box stuff you can think of, and the biggest thing is tell us what it is, what they have, and maybe the loan officer didn't ask because that's not a widely used asset on funds to close. And I have one more for you to kind of wrap it up before I look at some questions and those you have. And this was one I kind of gave you, state of Washington purchase as investment property, Great Ball. The problem was the appraiser marked the property as rural, not a problem at Home Express. Until we were able to demonstrate that there was close to major employment and commerce, we just changed it in our underwriting guide. Didn't even have to go back to the AMC and say, hey, this is suburban property, and we funded that loan. So with that, let's take on some questions here, Andrea, and see what we have in the chat box.
Sure thing, David. Let me just take a look. And we have a couple questions that came in, and one of them is, what about regarding with credit? What if the borrower has light trade lines? How do we overcome that issue with?
And again, with the manual underwrite, we'll take it as own merits. Why do they have no trade lines, right? It could be a personal choice, right? Then they should have some money saved up, right? Okay, great. And then we probably need housing history on that or some type of alternative trade similar to that where it demonstrates that they can afford and have the ability to pay that type of mortgage payment. So it just explore that a little bit. I've used the business owners. I've used the rent payment for the business, right? So that could be used, right? Because they're demonstrating they can pay a rent payment of some sort. But kind of get out of the box there, man. What do they have? It will kind of blow you away what loans can be done. And I really believe you have loans on your desk that if you connected with a Home Express account executive, we will get that through the finish line for you and fund it.
Okay, great. Here's one that came in the chat, and it has to do with the recent administration's change for the increase in rates based on credit. So do we have any insight about?
Yeah, no, great. I mean, that you're not going to get into a political statement. It's kind of counterintuitive to me is because I think individuals trying to live their life with the right financial and ethically doing this, I'm going to pay my bills on time, I'm going to save money, take care of my family, should be rewarded. But I'm also on the other side. That's why we offer FHA here is that, first-time home buyers and some of those that maybe moving up in their companies may not have the income level or the savings for their family, right? And so there should be programs. And I think the government has well with the FHA program. They lowered the MI, monthly MI. And so FHA is a great tool for using that, right? I can't really comment on that politically. I want everybody to have the opportunity that can afford a payment and that. But I'm also of the opinion is not everybody should be able to buy a house right now, right? That's a big expense. A lot of people don't understand the upkeep and the cost of their electric bill. Homeowners insurance in certain states have gone up. I know if you lived in the mountains up in Tahoe area, that homeowners insurance is expensive. I want to buy a house, and they really don't know all the costs that go with it. And so, kind of that I want to have everybody have the opportunity, but I think they should kind of earn that opportunity, just like I did. Right? I remember my first loan I got buying a house. I should to say it was a whopping $62,000 loan, and it was under 15% going FHA. Right? But I was younger, young family, got a nice 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 1,200 square foot house for my family. It went FHA, put my 3.5% down. There I was going. So, and the non-QM is ones typically it don't really fit that FHA first time home buyer because of income and the down payment, right? Because but there are programs out there.
Yeah, and you know what? I know I was chatting with marketing a couple days ago, and I believe that they're in the process of putting together kind of a document that like kind of outlines what those changes are. So stay tuned, more to come on that. And we do have one more question here, David, and then we'll wrap it up. What about payment shock or proof of rents for a first-time home buyer if they like have been renting a room from their relative and saving a lot of money, but they don't have like a quote unquote rental agreement.
Yeah,
How do we overcome that? But they're responsible with their finances.
yeah, if they make it up for the right financial decision, I always look at it this way because we have loan committee here, so don't leave a deal out. It comes through. We're not here to say no. We're going to say tell us more because we're going to try to make that deal work. But I've seen this time and time again where a couple or individual says, you know what, I'm going to elect for a cheaper housing payment or live with relatives to save money over time. To me, that's a great financial decision. But we need to document that. You should see where they actually saved up their money over time. So by somebody said, I haven't had paid rent in 2 years or very down, you should see monthly increases in their savings account as they're going. So they can afford it. They're just choosing not to. They're choosing not to save money to get that home. That is fine with us. We do those all the time, right? And that really goes into that reserve section as a compensating factor of not having a housing history.
Awesome, thank you. And I believe that that is all the questions that we have. So I'm going to just kind of wrap it up here real briefly. Our next month's webinar is Thursday, June 8th. And it is expanded programs to close more non-QM loans in 2023, right, Grider? That was something that's kind of been exciting in the works here at Home Express. So we wanted to share that with you all. So stay tuned for that. And then, of course, as always, you can go to our Home Express website, reach out for more information. If you're not currently an approved broker, you can fill out our application online. It's very easy, very streamlined process. You can also submit a loan scenario, right? And of course, you can reach out to your account executive for more information. And then just lastly, as always, David Grider, this is your personal cell phone number, right? So you're just waiting for that. You need more calls, right? That's what you told me.
I work 23 and a half hours a day. I got to sleep a half hour.
At least a half an hour. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to David Grider.
Yes,
but again, everybody, first of all, David, thank you for your time again today. Really appreciate it. Good, insightful stuff on how to overcome these challenging loans in the non-QM space. And for everybody that has attended, thank you for taking time out of your busy day. I know there's a lot going on. So thank you for that. As I said, everybody will be receiving a recording of this presentation as well as a deck in the next couple of days. So be on the lookout for that. I hope you all have a great day, a great month, and we'll see you on next month's webinar. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.